Wer sagt, wir brauchen uns um Jobverluste durch KI keine Sorgen machen, ist naiv. Als Euan Blair mit diesen Worten in unser Gespräch eingestiegen ist, dachte ich, das fängt gut an. Hier spricht jemand genau das an, wovor die Leute Angst haben. Und warum das wichtig ist? Die Chefs großer KI-Unternehmen warnen immer wieder vor der Job-Apokalypse. Und viele Angestellte fragen sich, ob der Bot, den sie gerade trainieren sollen, sie irgendwann ersetzt. Vorstände haben aber keine Wahl. Wer die Zukunft seiner Firma sichern will, muss neue Technologien einsetzen. Und er muss es schaffen, die Leute mitzunehmen, auch wenn ihre Ängste berechtigt sind. Euan Blair ist ein großartiger Gesprächspartner, um über solche Herausforderungen zu sprechen. Er hat nicht nur eins von Europas wertvollsten Startups für berufliche Weiterbildung gegründet, er ist auch der Sohn des früheren Premierministers Tony Blair. Im Podcast haben wir darüber gesprochen, welche Weiterbildung Arbeitnehmern und Arbeitgebern wirklich helfen, worauf es ankommt, wenn Führungskräfte ihre Mitarbeiter bei der Transformation mitnehmen wollen. Und was er noch von seinem Vater über Führung und Entscheidungen unter Unsicherheit gelernt hat. Und damit herzlich willkommen zu Handelsblatt Disrupt. Ich bin Larissa Holzki und ich freue mich, dass Sie zuhören. Und wenn Sie zu den Leuten gehören, die alles wissen wollen, aber am liebsten nur die Hälfte zahlen, dann habe ich noch ein Angebot für Sie. Das Handelsblatt mit den wichtigsten Nachrichten rund um Technologie, Wirtschaft und die Finanzwelt gibt es jetzt 12 Monate für den halben Preis. Alle Infos dazu wie immer in den Shownotes. Und damit geht es jetzt direkt zu meinem Gespräch mit Euan Blair, Gründer und CEO von Multiverse. Hi Euan, great to have you.
Hello, great to be here.
Euan, very happy to talk with you today because what I love about my job here is discussing what new technology means for all of us and what we should do about it now. When it comes to AI, this is exactly what your company Multiverse is about. You help people learn new skills for the AI age. Your goal is, and I quote, ensuring that AI benefits the workforce rather than displacing it. Do you think job losses from AI are a real danger, or is this more of a diffuse fear?
Look, anyone who tells you we should be relaxed about job losses from AI is being delusional. The reality is, right, jobs will change, jobs will be displaced. I think that is an inevitability. So the question we try and address more, and where I tend to focus, is, okay, so what can we do to mitigate that, right? AI presents incredible opportunities for companies and workers and governments, by the way, the kind of opportunities we can't afford to turn our back on, especially in Europe. But what we can't do is sleepwalk into a jobs crisis or an unemployment crisis and what will ultimately be a social crisis by not realizing if we don't train as many people as possible to adapt, we're all going to suffer.
And you look at almost every job and every role in a company. Where do you see the biggest need for AI training right now, and where will it matter most in the next year or two?
So I think this is one of the really exciting things about it. It comes down to frontline workers who are operating at the very kind of front of their industries, be they nurses, be they people in production lines and manufacturing, be they project managers, be they administrators, operations people. What frontline workers have that is so valuable is huge context, right? Understanding what good looks like in their jobs. They have to use a lot of their judgment. Judgment and context are two things that AI really struggles with. If you can train those workers to take their domain expertise and couple them with a kind of genuine technical ability to get the most out of AI, you effectively give those workers superpowers. And this is why top-down initiatives from kind of CEOs and boards on AI will nearly never succeed. You need to be able to carry your workforce with you. It's particularly important in Germany when you have robust unions and workers' councils, right? You've got to make sure you can really bring these folk together.
Right. You started Multiverse in 2016. Since then, it has become a unicorn. The company is now worth more than 1.8 billion euros, and you have raised more than 500 million euros in total. When investors give you that much money, they are betting that your company will keep working for a long time. Does that mean your view is from now on, this need for AI training will never really go away and it's here to stay permanently?
So it's a great question. Look, I think the need to train workers in the flow of their work to keep pace with technology is vital. right? I mean, when we started, we were often training people in how to use data and build data literacy and understand how kind of data can become a source of productivity for organizations. Increasingly, it was clear that AI was just the biggest, not only obsession for organizations, but the biggest opportunity to make real differences and grow organizations. And that's why we focused on this. In a few years' time, I think we will be in this AI cycle for a number of years, by the way. Some people say adoption will take 20 years. Others say it will take 5, but I don't think this is going anywhere soon. And there will always be technology you will need to train workers with. And actually, one of the things I think we've got wrong, if you look back over the last 20 years, you've had a relentless march of nearly every software tool under the sun being deployed in organizations. And yet productivity globally, and especially in Europe, has basically flatlined. And what that tells me is that we over-rotated on investing in technology and under-rotated on investing in the humans who are going to use that technology.
Nach einer kurzen Unterbrechung geht es gleich weiter. Bleiben Sie dran.
Rüstung neu gedacht. Vom Hype zur Umsetzung. Deutschland hat erstmals eine Militärstrategie. Verteidigungsminister Boris Pistorius setzt neue Leitlinien. Doch was heißt das konkret für Unternehmen und Industrie? Antworten gibt's auf der Handelsblatt-Konferenz Wirtschaftsfaktor Rüstung. 2 Tage Analyse, Debatte und Austausch mit führenden Köpfen aus Politik, Wirtschaft und Finanzwelt. Jetzt Ticket sichern auf handelsblatt-rüstung.de und 15% sparen mit dem Code Rüstung26.
Today's episode will be about all that and how do you find out who needs to learn what? Are young people more affected than older people? And what will this whole change ask of us over the next years? But here at Disrupt, we always want to get to know our guest first. So let's talk about how you became a founder and what shaped you. I know you've been asked about your childhood 1,000 times, but no exceptions here, not even for the son of Tony Blair. Accepted?
Yeah, I obviously grew up in very unique circumstances. I think one of the things, by the way, the biggest advantage I took from, I often reflect from growing up in Downing Street and with my dad, was this sense that your dad to you when you're a kid is nothing special, right? They're just a normal person. And I thought, okay, well, he's prime minister of the country. He's just a normal person. I could do whatever I wanted. And that sense of possibility was a really powerful and very kind of useful thing for me. Now, as I kind of got exposure to the real world, you realize quite quickly that that's not the case, but also many people don't ever get that sense of possibility. And the thing that really obsessed me was how frequently we were letting people leave the education system and go into nothing, right? And I saw this, I learned more in my first 3 months of my job when I went into the banking industry than I learned in 3 years at university. And I actually, once I left finance, moved into an organization helping long-term unemployed people find jobs. And the thing I realized was that you had great talent, great potential, but it was going underutilized because people were not being prepared for the world of work. Our education systems were overly obsessed with academics beyond everything else, and that was excluding a lot of people who could succeed. And so I kind of fell in love with this concept of apprenticeships. An apprenticeship is once how everyone was trained on the job, and the idea of training people in work to do productive things through application was just so obvious to me, and I couldn't see anyone else doing it. And so it was never that I wanted to be a founder because I thought it'd be really cool or really fun. It was because I looked at the market and I said, no one's doing this. Why aren't we building really effective talent pipelines from education into work? And why do we stop training people once they enter the workforce?
Yeah. So your father became prime minister when you were 13 and he was in office for 10 years, your whole youth. What did you learn from him about what even the most powerful man in a country can and cannot do about education and prosperity?
Well, look, one of the key things I learned, by the way, is politics is the art of the possible. You have to be very comfortable with the fact that you are going to piss plenty of people off, right? Whatever you do. So you have to, in the end, make decisions that you know will upset some people, but might please others. And you've got to be able to explain them and articulate them. The interesting thing that it's funny, sometimes people forget this about politics. Messaging matters, But actually having a clear anchoring in what you're trying to achieve is the most important thing. And it's something that I think any democratic politician needs to think about. How do you tell a bigger story about what you're doing? That was one of the things I learned from him that I think was really valuable to being a founder. If you can't tell a story that matters about your organization or the things you want to do, it makes it much harder to bring people on that journey with you.
There's one case where your father said publicly that your opinion mattered for his policy. It was during the planning stages of the Millennium Dome, London's big exhibition center, and your father proposed that it must pass the Euan test. It had to satisfy what his teenage son would want on a day out. Did you discuss politics at home? Did you try to get involved, and if so, on which topics?
No, I will say, by the way, the Millennium Dome was not a fabulous success, so I don't want that pinned on me. I don't know why Dad said that, but I was a 13-year-old kid. I wasn't involved. We did talk about politics, but more in terms of, you messed that up. How do you enact change? Yeah, well, it was often how do you enact change? How do you do things where you know you were going to face fierce opposition, and there is always one of the hardest things for any politician is how do you reflect public opinion but also not let it entirely shape you, right? You have to set a direction that sometimes not everyone might agree with, and this is one of the challenges I think democracies have had in general. You can't just react to the latest thing and tell people what they want to hear. And this was an important thing. I think a lot of these have echoes in business, right? One of our operating principles is being decisive even in ambiguity. When you are running a country or even a company, you're bombarded by information all the time, and lots of it is just not that important. So trying to make decisions fast, even when you're overwhelmed by information, was a really important principle.
And looking at what you do today, your father stood for an interesting political position, Labour, but with a market-friendly course. How did that shape your early picture of who really matters in a country and which jobs are especially important?
So I think it was an important thing, that a belief that you can basically be socially conscious and care about the world and want to help people, but at the same time be pro-business, pro-growth, and understand that markets can be forces for good. It's, if you think of the kind of business I tried to build, right, one of the things that I think is reasonably unique at Multiverse, and we do well, is we have this really profound social mission. Right? Equip the workforce to win in the AI era. Let's make sure workers don't become victims of this technology, but can embrace it and benefit from it. At the same time, I want to build a hugely successful commercial enterprise. And I think it's important we have more hugely successful commercial enterprises in Europe. So this idea that there could be a third way, you didn't have to be one thing or another thing, was really important to me.
So where do you see the individual as person's own duty to learn new skills? Should companies always take everyone along with them, or how much freedom do they need to adapt to new demands in this new tech age and to let people go if it's necessary?
I think you can find this really great blend of what is good for business and what is good for individuals. And we really focus on this because we start by diagnosing and understanding what are the goals of an organization, particularly when it comes to technology and AI. What are the capabilities of their people? And then how do you build training programs that are practical, applied, on the job, made up of projects and use cases that actually map to the goals of the company, but address capability gaps from those people? One of the challenges with kind of education as a market in the edtech market is there's been such a focus on learning purely as an employee benefit. Let employees learn whatever they want to learn, and hopefully a business will gain some of those benefits. If you want the organization to pay for it, it better benefit them too. And so trying to bring those two things together is really important. It also grounds the education we provide in economic outcomes. What do I really care about? I care about, can someone get a pay increase or a promotion or improve the trajectory of their career as a consequence of what we taught them? Because if we've done that, we've not just given them learning, right? We've actually helped change their circumstances. And that has always been more exciting to me. So I'm constantly thinking, how do you find this nexus of good for the employer, good for the individual? And the more we can find common ground on those things, I think the better for everyone.
You've said earlier, when your dad's running the country, it's easy to think anything's possible, in the sense, if he can do that, I can go and do whatever I want. What's to stop me? what makes that even more interesting is what you actually chose. You first studied ancient history and then you became an investment banker at Morgan Stanley. I mean, man, why?
Yeah, well, look, ancient history, I was a history nerd. I still love history, right? I thought, why not? This is, interesting. I get to spend 3 years delving into this subject I care about. At the time, by the way, the cost of higher education was much cheaper, so I didn't have to make some of the trade-offs people have to make now. I think, why banking? I was really obsessed with the idea that how markets allocate capital is important, and you need to understand that, right? You need to understand what are the principles that drive markets. How do economies get shaped? How do businesses grow? And so I never wanted to kind of dive into something I cared about socially without having a pretty foundational grounding in economics and finance. So it felt important to me. It wasn't, I'm never a believer that you should be overly planned with how you approach these things, but it felt like a sensible move.
And you finally found your passion with starting Multiverse. You started out by placing young people into apprenticeships, as you already mentioned. In your view, does the AI revolution hit young people harder or older people?
So I think it is probably more perilous for older people, though there will be friction for young people in the short term. And the reason I say that is, well, there are two things. First, by the way, if you lose your job when you're over the age of 50, the chances of you finding a job again are much, much smaller than if you lose your job in your 20s or even your 30s. Second, young people as digital natives tend to be often much more AI curious to start with, right? And more easily able to kind of adapt to the technology needs of organizations. Now, older workers, as we found, adopt technology really fast when you train them because they have context and they have experience. But if we're not careful, we'll see a lot of older workers get displaced if they cannot co-pilot effectively with AI and basically work alongside AI. They'll be automated out of existence. And I think that is a genuine existential threat that's really hard to overcome. I think for pipelines of talent, we do have to make sure, at the moment, one of the things, by the way, Germany does tremendously well is 40% of Germans, their highest qualification level is a vocational qualification, right? It is really stark to me that you guys have an youth unemployment rate that is less than half that in the UK, in part because you have really powerful vocational pathways into jobs, a really strong and robust apprenticeship system. Yes, there are things that can be improved, but I think in economies where you have a really big connection between work and education, you'll see a much smoother landing for young people into jobs. In economies like the UK and in America, by the way, where we become addicted to college or higher education or university at the expense of everything else, I think that is much more fraught.
So that brings us right to the question of what matters most for you today and what the sweet spot of your business is. So let's move on to the business talk. And I have to explain one more rule before that. To prevent my guests from using startup lingo and techie terms that only their bubble understands, I have this little squeaker.
Yes.
It's just there to remind you and me, everyone in the audience is an expert, but probably not on your topic. So if you hear it, just explain the term you used in a few simple words, okay?
Keep me honest, I'll do it.
Today, most of your revenue, it was around 80 million pounds recently, so about 94 million euros, comes from corporate upskilling. Tell us a little bit about how we can imagine this. What kind of upskilling do you offer and to whom?
Yeah. So we tend to focus really on, I mentioned kind of frontline workers, nurses, office workers, retail workers, people in factories, analysts, people in research, nearly every job in every part of the economy, right? We cover everything from defense and nuclear to government we work actually with 40 universities as well, training their people, and we work with kind of big financial services institutions. The thread that tends to connect the people we train is that they are people who are at risk from automation if they can't use AI in the flow of their work to become more productive. And we really try and look very closely at, can someone apply the knowledge, skills, and behaviors we're giving them to do their job better and faster? And if they can, let's help them build projects around the things we're teaching to do that effectively. So we tend to be quite a cross-section of the economy. In fact, our learners range in age from 16 to 73 is our oldest learner at the moment.
I think most of us have experience with corporate training. It reminds me that I'm overdue for mandatory AI training for 2026. To be honest, the last one didn't help me at all. I think I muted the videos, played them on max speed, and just answered the multiple choice questions from the gut. For me, that was more of a box ticking exercise than actual learning. Do you do that kind of training too?
Well, I mean, you've set me up quite well there. No, we definitely don't. But I think, look, I've done that training too. We all have to do it. It's deeply frustrating. It's not helpful. And it is training disguised. It's compliance disguised as training, right? It's not particularly useful. The thing that we try and focus on is you cannot sheep dip your way through this. You cannot train every worker in the same way. You need to meet them where they are. And in order to meet them where you are, you need to understand really three things. Their context, right? How skilled are they at the moment? What do they know? What do they not know? What tools do they have access to? Their company context. What is their company focused on? Is it revenue generation? Is it cost avoidance? Is it cost reduction? Is it something else? And you need to understand their team context. So who's their line manager? What do they care about? The way we work with organizations is we spend a lot of time on this diagnosis. We have just released a diagnosed voice agent where we actually have an interview with our agentic diagnoser that asks them things like, how frequently do they use technology at work? How frequently do they use data? What AI tools do they have access to? Where do they get stuck? Where do they think they could do their job better if they had the ability? And we really try and just ingest or consume as much of that context as possible and then build it into the training. So this for me is the biggest difference, right? It is the training for a nurse who wants to use AI to triage patients better, right? Is much more, it is very different from someone working in a retail store who needs to basically figure out where to position their merchandise so more people buy it.
And how do the trainings look like in the end? What do I get from it?
So we have a mix of online training, our agentic coach Atlas that acts as a kind of Socratic tutor. Socratic meaning it doesn't give you the answer. It helps tease you towards the answer yourself, and human coaches, which are still a really important part of our solution, right? I think one thing AI is not good at is enforcing accountability. Humans are good at enforcing accountability.
And why do you think so?
Well, because if someone says to you, if your AI coach or our agentic coach Atlas says, you need to turn up at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning on a call with me, the consequences for missing that, like you don't worry about disappointing AI. If you're meeting, one of our great coaches and they say to you, I'm going to see you at 10 a.m. and they're waiting on our platform to speak to you through a video call and you don't turn up, you've done something wrong, right? There is something about human accountability, and humans care about upsetting other humans. Germans, like the British, are pretty polite. People don't like to do that.
So I've understood that you spend a lot of time figuring out what the best training for me is, but how do you actually measure whether an employee has learned something through your training, something that really helps the company and that helps them keep their job long-term or take on a new one?
So what you are asking there is, for me, the most important factor in delivering effective education in the workplace. Can you evidence that there is a return on investment? So we spend a lot of time saying things like, right, if you are a multinational retailer and your big objective is within this division, improve operating margins by 3%, okay, we need to show how our training is helping you improve those operating margins. So we take this kind of series of projects and use cases individual workers are doing, and we don't just look at hours saved, right? Or time saved, or even cost saved. We look at, was this fulfilling the objective that you set out at the start? And it's why we always begin with a pretty comprehensive understanding of what does that organization care about. There are customers we work with, big global companies, where we will often meet 100 people across their leaders, managers, and executives to understand those priorities, as well as our agentic coach, before we begin an engagement. It's like, if you can't understand what they need, then providing evidence that it worked what you're delivering work is challenging.
Mm-hmm. Our audience consists of many business leaders and people who are responsible for others. So I love discussing leadership challenges everyone can learn from. We talked a lot now about what people need to learn and who needs it most. But for me, it seems easier to provide the training than to get people participating. Tell us, how do you approach this at Multiverse?
Yeah, we've been pretty uncompromising around kind of AI and upskilling, which shouldn't surprise you, given this is what we do. A majority of our team have been trained formally in AI. We have lots of informal trainings. We have regular hackathons. We have guest speakers. We have sessions on this. We have a team that helps with internal transformation, reimagining workflows and rebuilding them around AI tools. And one of the most important things as well is we spend a lot of time dog fooding, i.e. using our own product ourselves and testing that. I want to make sure you don't put the squeaker out there. So I did explain that.
I noticed that.
And then the other thing that we've done is I instituted the AI Founders Award. Every quarter, one person receives £10,000 or euros for the most innovative thing they've built in AI. And we've seen the results,
company.
Right? Inside the company, correct. And we've improved revenue per employee by 50% over the last 12 months.
Interesting. I often meet people who think that the AI revolution changes everyone's job and business except theirs. What do you do to not miss your own disruption?
Yeah, it's kind of, that is a real thing. Right. A lot of people don't think about this enough. So I find AI, now I'm fortunate, I have a chief of staff, but AI has basically given me an additional chief of staff. We use it for preparing board packs, quarterly business reviews. We have somewhere in the region of 2,000, even 3,000 recorded customer conversations every month that I go and frequently scan transcripts for what are the big themes, what do people care about, where are they really delighted by our product, where are they not so happy. And I find that AI can do that in a way that we would have to have teams of people working on this otherwise. And as you kind of build agentic capability, I mean, we've been building our own agents here. I have an agent that helps summarize big pieces of news that are happening around the world and deliver it to my inbox and other things. It is, yeah, I mean, if I'm not using Claude every day, I feel bereft, right?
On your company website, I can see logos from companies such as Microsoft, KPMG, Citi. Who pays for these programs? The companies themselves, or is this about government funding?
So it's a mix, but what we try and do in any market where we operate is look at what incentives and subsidies does the government provide to train people. A great example is in Germany, there's a federal budget of at least 4.1 billion euros that is supposed to be spent on training and upskilling people. Most of that money is going underspent because companies find it really hard to wade through the regulation, access the funding, everything else. We build that into our platform and delivery model. We're able to show evidence of learning for every learner, how many hours they spent learning, what they were able to deliver as a result, and map that against government objectives. And that allows companies to access this funding. And I think it's really important because the reality is, it's crazy when you think of the technology leaps we've had in 15 years, but investment in employee training has gone down. And it's gone down by quite a lot. The only thing that has stopped it going down further is government stepping in and saying, we want to make budgets available to train people. And I think this is one of the things that government can do better than almost anyone else. There's a lot of talk at the moment about workers' rights. For me, the most important workers' right is a right to be reskilled and to know that the government will help ensure your company invests in you. Because I think if we don't solve that, the social consequences of massive labor market displacement, it's pretty terrible, right? Think of how populist our politics already are. And in the UK, we're now on our 5th prime minister in 5 years, right? That is astonishing and frankly embarrassing. In Germany, there's been a pretty febrile political environment in the last few years. This will get much worse if we can't make people feel like government will not just leave them on the scrap heap and will support them to get retrained.
Nach einer kurzen Unterbrechung geht es gleich weiter. Bleiben Sie dran.
Mit Bader Trading hat deine Woche jetzt 6 Tage. Auf badertrading.de hast du alles rund um den Wertpapierhandel im Blick. Neues vom Finanzmarkt, exklusive Marktinsights, börsentägliche Videonews, Echtzeitkurse und deine persönliche Watchlist. Mit Bader Trading jetzt auch samstags Wertpapiere handeln. Trading braucht keinen 9 to 5. Bader Trading. Samstagshandel von 14 bis 19 Uhr mit ausgewählten Partnern. Mehr auf badertrading.de. Keine Empfehlung oder Beratung. Wertpapierhandel birgt Risiken. Totalverlust des eingesetzten Kapitals möglich.
Earlier this year, you acquired the Berlin-based upskilling startup Stack Fuel, and you have big plans for Germany. You briefly touched on that, but maybe we can dig a little deeper. What's different here compared to the British market from your perspective?
Yeah, a few things. So I think, as I said, vocational learning is much better understood. And that starts as a real positive. There is an understanding that, classroom-based learning isn't the be-all and end-all, and you can do really effective things training people in more applied workforce settings. So that is a great start. I think the other thing is you have a particular kind of challenge in Germany around deindustrialization and things like the auto industry. We went through a lot of that in the 1980s in Britain. And so that's kind of less of a focus. But in Germany, which so much of the German identity has been defined through its heavy industries, how do they adapt with automation and how do they compete with China, with America, with South Korea? These are all big discussions. There is a much more robust social contract between employer and employee in Germany than there is in Britain, right? It is much harder to fire workers in Germany. And again, whether you agree or disagree with that, the reality is it doesn't mean you have to train people. Otherwise, you get continuously less productive. And so that creates actually, I would say, even more of an incentive to reskill workers for what is coming and to make them more efficient and productive than we have in the UK. And Germany has an incredibly skilled workforce. But I think compared to some other economies and the British economy, fell behind on digital transformation. So and then I've been quite surprised but pleased with how clear-eyed German industry leaders are about this. They know it's a big problem. They know they want to fix it. You have people like Carsten Wildberger in the government who's committed to training 46 million workers. There is a real acknowledgement of the problem. And what history tends to show is when Germany says, right, we're going to solve a problem we've got, they tend to deliver on that. So I would be cautiously optimistic. At least people are saying the right things. Now the question is, can they walk the talk? Right?
And you're very polite, but what can we do better and how do we do that?
Yeah, where I think Germany struggles is there are deal cycles can be longer because there is a lot of risk aversion.
So
right?
It takes you a long time to close a deal with a German customer.
It can take more time to win contracts, right? The good news is we're finding AI is just because it's the top of board and CEO agendas, that helps cut through a lot of the bureaucracy. But in general, I've got to know plenty of German startup founders. One of the things that would worry me were I German is most of their business tends to come from America now. Right? And they find it much easier to sell in the US and get their products adopted faster than in Germany, where the enterprise buying cycles can be slower. I think you need genuinely kind of pioneering executives because when you do operate in an environment where workers, councils, and unions are voices at the table, you need to make sure you bring them on the journey. Now, as I said, for us, that can be quite beneficial in some ways because we can say to organizations, we know you're struggling to roll out AI because there is genuine worker resistance. If you can make a commitment to train your people and invest in them, then actually that is a really good strategy for how you can drive AI adoption. It is not, we're just going to throw technology in there and see who it replaces. It is, we are going to help you all become the most technology-enhanced version of yourselves and everyone benefits. So I think, those are all, I would say, live discussions and things that we see.
So
talent is great. The talent, we're finding this. We're hiring loads and loads of people in Berlin, Munich, Düsseldorf, Stuttgart, lots of talent.
So how is business going for you in Germany?
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to say we have 20x'd, so 2,000% up the number of program launches since we acquired the organization, which is quite something. There is big demand. We will have, and I'm sure I will come back to Handelsblatt to tell you about it. We will have some big announcements in the next kind of few weeks and months of companies we're doing deals with. And as I said, the market demand is massive. The other thing is workers themselves are increasingly reaching out to say, okay, I'm worried about what my future is going to be if I don't get reskilled. Can you talk to us about it? The other thing we're doing in Germany that we haven't really done anywhere else is we're training people who are already unemployed or at risk of redundancy in how to get jobs, where a lot of these people have 10, 15, even 20 years of domain experience, but no technology skills. We give them the technology skills and then help them re-enter the labor market. And so that's something I think is really exciting because it massively aligns with our mission. And unfortunately, is only going to become more of a problem if we don't deal with it.
Mm-hmm. And for what kind of jobs do you train them?
You see a lot of interesting ones. So for example, you can take people who have a specialism in the auto industry, where the auto industry is shedding jobs right at the moment, and retrain them for defense, retrain them for FMCG, production, various other areas where they have adjacent skills. And that's very interesting. We're often training people who are former office administrators or operations managers to step into technology roles, product manager roles, project manager roles. We have some really interesting examples there.
Mm-hmm. Talking about market demand and growth, Multiverse is now 10 years old, which means your very first investors will probably want to see their money back before too long. You've also just announced your first ever cash positive quarter, something many companies highlight when they want to show they can survive midterm without fresh capital. Are you working on plans for an IPO? And if so, where?
So, unsurprisingly, I will give you a politician's answer on that, which is to say that I can't reveal anything about our current plans on that front. I think I've always said, build a great company, and an IPO is fairly straightforward because you have something that appeals to investors. I actually had a board meeting earlier this week, and I will say none of our investors are looking to get liquidity just yet, so they seem very happy, which is good. But I think it's going to be really interesting over the next few years where the IPO pipeline has gone from zero to now becoming really quite strong. Mm-hmm. How many IPOs will happen in Europe? How many will happen in London? How many will happen in New York? And we've got to make sure we make it as easy as possible for companies to go public in Europe and the UK. This is a discussion that the British government are having very live at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for the political answer. Let's zoom out for the time we have left. Here's a question that's on the minds of many school leavers and their parents again right now. What should I study today? What's the right kind of training? And looking at actual job prospects, it's become hard again in recent years. For a long time, people said, learn to code. Today, some say English is the more important programming language than Python. So what would you recommend? Ancient history?
Honestly, ancient history, only if you're really interested in it. I mean, I think the reality is anyone who tries to predict what people should study or what the labor market will look like in the kind of 3 to 5 year term is always wrong. You're completely right. Your point about telling everyone to code, and now, it's becoming increasingly trivial, right? In the AI era. I think, honestly, the most important things are taste, judgment, critical thinking. Our education systems are going to have to adapt really quickly to be teaching people these things. Employers tend to care much more about what you can do than what you know. So you can go and study nearly any subject, right? The question is, can you evidence that by studying that subject, you're building these skills they're going to find useful? And I would say everyone should be getting conversant with AI, right? You can think as an individual. If I'm a student, how am I using AI? Where am I challenging it? Where am I kind of letting it make me a bit lazy? Where am I actually using it in a way that amplifies kind of my own voice? One of the challenges we have at the moment is we all see this. There's a lot of AI slop out there, right? I sometimes feel like if you go on LinkedIn, it's hard to find a comment or a post that wasn't just written by AI and responded to by AI, which is a problem. So I think people who are able to distinctly maintain their voice and their agency while using AI tools to get it out there more broadly and finesse and kind of work with them, those people will benefit.
I happened to talk to an executive coach yesterday, someone who really helped me a lot early in my career. Shout out to Friederike Mirbach. She advises business leaders on communication. And yesterday she told me, Larissa, business is going really well for me in times when everyone uses AI. Human communication becomes even more important. And you briefly touched on that already. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So to bring this full circle at the end, how much of business transformation do you think is a kind of politics, finding the right words at the right time and looking at all the examples you've seen, how do you get that right?
It's a deep question. I'll try and give you the best answer I can. I will say, by the way, having a great exec coach is valuable to anyone. And you know this, I'm such a believer in the power of coaching, right? And it's one of the reasons we do it. I think it's really valuable. The challenge that we see so frequently is there is, around the world, there is an increasing backlash against AI, and it can be presented in very adversarial terms. It probably doesn't help when the founders and CEOs of a lot of the foundational model companies are constantly talking about Job-Apokalypse, everything else. One of the biggest challenges is that if you kind of say to your workforce, we're all in on AI, we're going to do it, and we're going to figure it out as we go, they will get very worried, right? Actually, often what workers want to hear is that there is a plan, my needs are being thought about. This is something that I can be a part of and join the revolution and help our kind of organizations stay more productive. And I think leaders have to be really careful. They don't get cavalier in just saying, AI is happening, deal with it. It's your responsibility to upskill yourself. I think we do have a responsibility to take workers on the journey, and that AI can't give you an easy solution to those problems. It requires emotional intelligence. It requires a bit, and we talked a lot about history in this, but sometimes the understanding of history, right? Where has these things gone wrong before? You had your own movements. We had the Luddites in Britain during the Industrial Revolution. You had them in Germany, people tearing down machines and other things. Nobody wants to see that. But it will happen if we cannot make people feel like they have human agency. The worst thing we can do in the AI revolution is to say, AI is really smart, let's give them our agency. It's one of the distinguishing factors of being a human being.
Mm-hmm. Right. Euan, with Multiverse, you're tackling a real issue. Our conversation has also shown lifelong learning and upskilling isn't a problem that can be solved by one company alone. I hope some of the thoughts we shared today help encourage and inspire people to find their own way of tackling it and get it right. Thanks for your time and the conversation.
Thank you, Larissa. It was a pleasure.
Und das war's auch schon wieder mit Handelsblatt Disrupt. Wenn es Ihnen gefallen hat, dann abonnieren Sie unseren Podcast und sagen Sie es weiter. Redaktion Larissa Holzki, Produktion Igo Fecke.
Die Zukunft unserer Wirtschaft entscheidet sich jetzt in den Unternehmen, denn dort liegt das Potenzial, um wieder Weltspitze zu sein. Was es dazu braucht? Ein neues Mindset. Menschen, die Verantwortung übernehmen und Entscheidungen nicht länger aufschieben. Dafür steht der Pulse Women Economic Summit. Treffen Sie über 300 weibliche Top-Führungspersönlichkeiten, die heute schon die Transformation prägen und morgen die deutsche Wirtschaft zu neuer Stärke führen. Seien Sie dabei und sparen Sie mit dem Code PODCAST 10% auf den Ticketpreis. Anmeldung unter handelsblatt-pulse-summit.de.